Greetings fellow Earthlings, in this episode I'm going to show you all the reasons why you definitely want one of these Maseratis and the one big reason why you might want to think twice. Let's start off by hearing the best feature of this car. Yeah, definitely the best feature of this Maserati is the sound, and that howl comes from the Ferrari-derived F136 engine that this car shares with the Ferrari 458. Now, importantly, it's only the block that those cars share. This has different heads and a different crank. The Ferrari has, of course, the flat plane crank, and this car has a more traditional cross plane crank like an American muscle car. And that means that the sound is kind of as if a Mustang and a Ferrari had a baby. Now, that combination is good for 454 horsepower through the 6-speed ZF transmission, and allegedly that is good for a 0 to 60 time of 5.1 seconds. And let's see if that's true. Some of you may be thinking that for 454 horsepower, that 0 to 60 time is not particularly impressive. And the reason for that is this car weighs a meaty 4,400 pounds. And that's a whole 1,000 pounds more than the Ferrari 458. And that extra weight has more of an effect than just the 0 to 60. It also affects the handling. And you'll notice in this car, if you go into a corner with some exuberance, you will hear some tire squeal, but not from the rear tires. It's from the front tires understeering out of the apex, which is hardly confidence inspiring. And it makes this car not feel chuckable like you might expect in something like a Carrera, or I'm sure that Ferrari 458. Putting that big V8 in this heavy car comes with another cost: fuel economy. Now, no one buys one of these cars expecting it to have the running costs of a Prius, but if you drive it like you stole it, the best you can expect is 12 miles per gallon. And if you just drive like a normal person, overall you're going to get an average of 16 miles per gallon. It's not all bad news, of course. This car is Italian, and like many of its Ferrari cousins, the styling is by Pininfarina. And I think the front area with the big gaping fish mouth is really dramatic and far more interesting than the alternative German cars that you might be looking at. And from the rear, it's also very well proportioned and quite muscular. I think most people would agree that this is a very good looking car and certainly turns some heads as I've been driving around today. Another bonus in the styling department is these cars came out in 2008 and didn't see any substantial refresh until 2018, meaning that some of the cheapest cars you can get look more or less the same as some of the most expensive cars, which is good news for any of you trying to flex on a budget. That dramatic styling does come with a downside. That long hood with that big fishy mouth does love to ground itself out on every dip and driveway, which is something you generally don't even have to worry about on even a sporty BMW or Mercedes. And so you do have to remember to take uneven ground slowly and turn at an angle, or you're going to hear that soul-destroying crunch and regret life. An aspect of this car that I really don't enjoy is the transmission. This has the 6-speed ZF transmission, essentially an automatic box, though it does have these flappy paddles. It reminds me of the transmission in the Aston Martin V8 Vantage that I made a video of a little while ago, and I feel for both of these cars the transmission ruins them. This does have the option of the MC transmission, which is essentially an automated manual like the Ferrari F1 transmission, and that definitely does improve shift times. It also is famous for soul-destroying repair bills.
Hold on, what's the dog doing? Oh yeah, subscribe now. Delta says thank you.
Comfort-wise, this car does fairly well. It is a Grand Tourer after all. For an Italian car, the leather is fairly hard. The seats themselves are quite wide, which is good news for those of you who love desserts. And the rear seats also do accommodate an adult, and certainly your kids will be fairly happy back there. This car is convertible, as you can tell, and while it is lovely on this beautiful California afternoon, I do think that the hardtop version of the GranTurismo is the better looking car. And another potential downside to open top motoring is scuttle shake, and this car certainly experiences that. For any of you unfamiliar with the term scuttle shake, it comes from the lack of structural rigidity in a car's chassis from cutting the roof off. And you can see it in this car anytime you go over any uneven ground and the dash tries to shake itself to pieces. And while it's not going to shake itself to pieces, it is quite disconcerting, and certainly more than you would expect on a German engineered vehicle like an SL 550. And it also suggests that at the limit, the chassis on this car is going to be compromised. If we're going to talk about this car's chassis, we need to talk about its suspension. Now, the suspension setup on this car is fairly basic. As you would imagine, it does have quite a firm feel to it, though unlike its German counterparts, there's no adjustability. What you get is what you get. Now, adjustability aside, on your equivalent Porsche, Mercedes or BMW, they do an amazing job of being quite firm and sporty feeling when you want it, but then also magically soaking up any lumps and bumps as you come across them. This car doesn't. You're going to feel everything, and your girlfriend is going to complain. The ergonomics of this car leaves something to be desired. On your average vehicle, you jump in there, you can kind of figure out how to operate things and where they go. In this car, I feel like just some random Italian guy eager to go to lunch just decided they're going to throw the button somewhere that's vaguely on the dash, and good luck figuring it out. In most cars, you can figure it out as you go along. In this car, you want to grab the instruction manual and spend some time on it. When it comes to living with this car on a daily basis, my biggest pet peeve are these beeping parking sensors. Now, you have to have parking sensors because the prehistoric electronics package in this car doesn't come with a rear view camera. But it's difficult to turn them off, and they will trigger all the time. Even if you're front at the traffic lights, they will trigger as if you're 5 inches from a wall. Now, there is a button hidden by the steering wheel next to the trunk release that you can use to turn them off, but that only works temporarily. As soon as they see something new, they will trigger all over again. To turn them off more permanently, you have to go through multiple menus on the screen, and then if you wanted to park again, heaven forbid, you have to turn them all back on again. And that just gives you an idea of how this old electronics package can be annoying on a daily basis.
These cars also suffer from that annoying sticky plastic issue you find on older Ferraris. There's also no push button ignition. They all come with one of these ye olde style flip out keys. The trunk on the convertible is small, really small. Fine for a couple of carry-ons and some light groceries, but don't plan on any golf clubs or anything more ambitious. The stereo system is surprisingly old school. It will connect by Bluetooth for phone calls, but not for music. So unless you're planning on installing an auxiliary or some sort of upgrade, expect to break out your CD collection. Also, like its Ferrari cousins, this Maserati will give you 18 seconds of drama every time you start it up while you wait to see if the check engine light is going to go out or if you're going to spend the day questioning your life choices.
So here's the truth about owning one of these Maseratis. They certainly look good, they sound good, they're a decent driving experience, and really they're not wildly unreliable. Certainly no worse than your equivalent BMW or Audi. You're going to come across some of the same kind of issues like leaking valve covers, leaking timing covers, some coolant leaks, and the occasional electrical gremlin. But when something does break, that's when the Maserati story changes. Because while the car itself may have depreciated into affordability, the parts prices haven't. And let me show you what I mean. Let's start by comparing some common repairs on this Maserati to a Mercedes E550 AMG and a BMW 650i, both of which are high-performance V8 convertibles that stack up well against this Maserati. And this Maserati is heavy and it's known for going through suspension components. So let's start with something simple like an upper control arm. Now on the Mercedes, you can go to the dealer, they have them in stock. An upper control arm is $406. For the BMW, they can get one for you within 2 days and it's $423. At the Maserati dealer, if you want to buy an upper control arm, they won't sell it to you. You have to buy the upper control arm, the lower control arm and the knuckle all as one unit. It's a 3-week special order and it's going to cost you $4,558. Now you can go to the aftermarket of course, but it takes some time to try to find those parts. And on this car, an upper control arm was sourced online. It took a while to find it. It was quite awkward to get it to fit, and it still cost $800, which is double the price of a dealer part for the BMW and the Mercedes. Let's talk about brakes. These cars are heavy and they are known for eating brakes. If you own one for any period of time, brakes are going to be an unavoidable expense. Now if you go to the Mercedes dealer and you want to get a full set of brakes for your E550 AMG, it's going to cost you $1,024 and they're going to have them in stock. For your BMW 650i, if you want to get a full set of brakes, pads and rotors for the front and for the rear, they can have them within 2 days and it's going to cost you $2,036. Now if you go to the dealer to get brakes for your Maserati, it's going to take them 7 weeks to get them in stock. You have to pay in advance and it's going to be $5,500. And that gives you an idea on why these cars depreciate so much when such a common wear item costs more than double the price of the competition. Something else you might want to consider before buying one of these Maseratis is dealer network. Now for a Mercedes or a BMW, if I wanted to get a part today, I've got a choice of 3 different dealers all within a 1 hour's drive. But for the Maserati, it's a 3-hour drive to Orange County and back to get any parts that I might want. And that's assuming that they actually have the parts. This car needs a second key. Now for the Mercedes or the BMW, that's not a big deal. They can have one within 2 or 3 days. The Mercedes is $400 and the BMW is $500. For the Maserati, the key is $912, but it's also on indefinite back order, which means you have to pay in advance, they don't do any refunds, and they can't tell you when it's going to arrive. So what do you think? Is this Maserati worth it? Buying the car is the easy part. Maintaining it is where things get real. Even if you have endless piles of cash, you're not going to be able to avoid the wait times and the hunting for parts and the compromises that come with that. If you have a second car and you really love this vehicle, then maybe it's going to work for you. But for a lot of people, these cars can become an expensive headache. And that's why you need to be careful in the second-hand market, because so many of these cars are cheap because the people that are selling them have got fed up of paying for them. And they want to pass those problems on to someone else. You just want to make sure that that someone else isn't you. Unfortunately, that's all we have time for this week. Thank you very much for watching. Till next time.